This is the AN602 WW2, the device history remembers as the Tsar Bomba, the single most powerful explosion ever unleashed by human hands. Created by Soviet engineers at the height of Cold War tensions, it carried an unimaginable yield of 50 megatons, dwarfing every nuclear weapon before or since. In this episode, we take you through how this extraordinary device was delivered, detonated, and what the world witnessed in the minutes and hours following the test. My name is Marcus Reed, and this is Iron Blueprint. The Tsar Bomba was a massive, air-dropped thermonuclear weapon. It measured 6.9 feet across and 26 feet long, about the size of a London double-decker bus laid on its side. Its weight was equally astonishing, roughly 54,000 pounds. The outer shell was constructed from steel and lined internally with beryllium, which helped reflect radiation during the reaction process. Beneath that was a synthetic insulation layer intended to keep internal components at stable temperatures during transport. At the nose sat a protected control module equipped with radio rangefinders and barometric sensors used to determine detonation altitude. The tail section contained 3 fixed stabilizing fins, along with a large rear compartment holding a multi-stage parachute assembly. To understand how this extraordinary device worked, we first need to explore what transported it. The bomb was carried by a specially modified variant of the Soviet Tu-95 strategic bomber known as the Tu-95V. To house the AN602, engineers widened the bomb bay to 5.8 feet and extended it to 23.45 feet. A heavy-duty beam-type rack was mounted directly to the aircraft's load, bearing internal structure. To make room for the enormous casing, 2 fuel tanks were removed and an internal bulkhead was repositioned. The tailgun normally used for defensing was stripped out and replaced by sensor probes designed to measure heat and overpressure from the blast. The entire aircraft was repainted in heat-reflective white, intended to give the crew at least some protection from the thermal radiation. Even with these modifications, the Tsar Bomba was so large that the Tu-95V had to carry it semi-externally, with part of the casing protruding beyond the bomb bay doors. After crews secured the weapon and completed a long series of ground checks, the Tu-95V was cleared for takeoff. The bomber departed from Olenya Air Base on the Kola Peninsula, climbing to about 6 miles in altitude as it headed toward the designated test range. The target area, State Test Site Number 4. 6 was located on Novaya Zemlya, a remote Arctic archipelago consisting of barren rock, ice, and vast stretches of uninhabited wilderness. The explosion zone chosen for the test, known as Zone S, lay roughly 9 miles north of Michushika Bay. The nearest settlement, 7E, sat 34 miles away and had already been evacuated. At 11:32 a.m., October 30th, 1961, the Tu-95V arrived over the target and released the AN602. Immediately after release, the bomb's enormous parachute system deployed. The assembly weighed nearly 4,000 pounds and contained 9 separate parachutes. The sequence began with a small drobe chute, which pulled out a larger stabilizing canopy. Next came 3 mid-sized parachutes, followed by 3 significantly larger canopies, and finally a gigantic main parachute. The last canopy alone measured over 17,000 square feet. This slowed the fall for 88 seconds, giving the bomber just enough time to flee to a survivable distance, roughly 28 miles. The device was programmed to detonate at 13,000 feet, the altitude Soviet scientists believed would produce maximum blast effects while drastically reducing radioactive fallout. 2 internal systems worked together: a radio altimeter that measured distance to the ground, and barometric sensors confirming altitude through air pressure. Only when these readings matched were the internal safeties removed. Inside the weapon, 2 spherical primary charges were located at the front and rear. Each sphere was surrounded by layers of high-performance explosives, a beryllium reflector, and a plutonium core. A network of spark gaps and high-voltage capacitors ensured that all detonators fired within 1 microseconds, initiating the first stage of nuclear fission. The compressed plutonium reached a supercritical state, releasing an enormous burst of heat, radiation, and neutrons. temperatures exceeding 100 million degrees Celsius, far hotter than the sun's core. This energy triggered the weapon's second stage, where a cylindrical assembly of lithium deuteride and a central plutonium rod underwent a fusion reaction. Lithium deuteride generated tritium when struck by neutrons, and the resulting mix of hydrogen isotopes fused under extreme pressure, producing the bulk of the bomb's energy. Originally, the outer tamper was designed to be depleted uranium, which would have boosted yield to 100 megatons, but chief designer Andrei Sakharov ordered it replaced with lead, cutting the yield in half and dramatically reducing fallout. The entire chain of events, from initial compression to full fusion reaction, occurred in less than a millionth of a second. The detonation began with a flash of light, so intense it could be seen from over 600 miles away. Witnesses described it as brighter than the midday sun and nearly impossible to look at. A gigantic fireball rapidly expanded to nearly 5 miles in diameter. It would have reached the ground if not for the enormous shockwave rebounding upward and flattening the lower half of the fireball, creating the iconic mushroom shape captured in photographs. The resulting mushroom cloud rose to 42 miles in height. Its top spread to nearly 59 miles wide. The blast produced seismic vibrations equivalent to a magnitude 5.0 earthquake. Even at a distance of more than 60 miles, the Tu-95V was struck by the shockwave, violently shaken and temporarily forced downward. The four regaining control. On the ground, the explosion leveled rocky terrain and reportedly melted vast stretches of earth into a dark, glass-like plain. The village of Seveny, 34 miles away, was obliterated. Windows shattered as far away as Norway and Finland, over 500 miles from the epicenter. It was the single most powerful human-made explosion ever recorded. The Tsar Bomba was never intended to be a practical battlefield weapon. It was too large, too heavy, and too complex to be deployed in real combat. But as a political message, it was devastatingly effective. It demonstrated the peak of superpower escalation and simultaneously revealed the terrifying consequences of continuing down that path. Just 2 years later, the world's major nuclear states signed the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, ending atmospheric nuclear tests. The AN/602 proved a point, not about warfighting capability, but about the unimaginable scale of destruction humanity was now capable of unleashing. It remains a one-of-a-kind weapon, never repeated. If you'd like to explore the origins of long-range missile warfare, check out our video on the V2 rocket. This was an enormous project to recreate and explain, and much about the Tsar Bomba remains secret to this day. If you notice anything we missed or want to add your own insight, feel free to comment. Thank you for watching.